So my name is Samantha Jackson. I am one of the career readiness consultants here at Kent ISD, and I'm joined by my co-host, Catherine Goldberg, who is also a career readiness consultant.
All right, so our agenda for today, our topic is teaching Holland codes interactively. So we're going to do some welcome and warm up. We are then going to do like a Holland codes 101. If it's been a little while since you took your career development course in graduate school, we'll kind of refresh on Holland codes, ground us in some shared language and shared understanding there. Then we're going to talk a little bit about engagement in learning more broadly. We will then dive into the meat of our session, which is example activities, reviewing them, having some small group discussion, brainstorming, analyzing there, and then we will close out for today. All right, ready?
So we'd love to get an idea of who is here with us today. So feel free to put this info in the chat, your name, role, school, grade level, pronouns. Love to get a sense of who's here. One thing we love about Career Readiness Network is we get people from all over and we get people from all different levels. So go ahead and feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm also going to put up a poll here every time we do a would you rather question related to our topic. So would you rather be an expert in solving puzzles and riddles or an exceptional storyteller who can captivate any audience? So I'll throw that poll up now. Great, we've already got some variety. We got some high school, we got some elementary, we got middle school, got college. So we really have the whole spectrum here today, which is really exciting. All right, looks like most people have participated in our poll. Let's see if I can share the results here with you all. So most people said that they would like to be an exceptional storyteller who can captivate any audience. Just a couple said they'd be an expert in solving puzzles and riddles. I think I would personally prefer to be an expert in solving puzzles and riddles. I love puzzles and I love riddles, but I don't like not knowing. So I would love to be able to solve anything. This will be great as we go into our discussion today about some strength things. So for those who aren't familiar with the Career Readiness Department here at Kent ISD, Catherine and myself are two of the Career Readiness consultants, and we have two others on our team. And each of us works to support different districts within the Kent ISD service area. So over here on the left, we have our list of schools that we support. So we have kind of your traditional public schools, we have charter schools. If you are in the Kent ISD service area and you don't see your school listed, it does not mean we don't support you. Feel free to reach out to me or Catherine, and we will definitely get you connected to us or someone else that can help you. In our work, we provide professional development such as this, so kind of bigger regional things through the ISD. And we also offer professional development in specific districts and schools and even with smaller groups of staff or teachers. Related to college and career readiness. We help support EDP implementation. So whether that is helping schools understand their EDP platforms like Zello or Naviance or Maven or UScience or all of the different things, but even more so helping schools better understand how to utilize the EDP process to like its full potential to really impact students. We help connect schools to industry, so bringing in professionals for things like panels and industry tours and guest speakers and career fairs and things like that to help make those connections to actual careers. And we help schools develop or find career readiness resources. So we'll have schools ask for specific activities or lessons or things to do with their students, and we'll help, again, either find or create those. And really, this all goes to our overarching goal, which is to engage in the K-12 career readiness planning process. So we know that career readiness needs to happen at all grade levels. It can't just happen in 11th and 12th grade. And so really our goal, and the reason we kind of work with specific districts, is to see that full scope of the K through 12 spectrum, to make sure that things are building off of each other. It all makes sense. Students are getting the same types of opportunities, but really, again, it's that whole K through 12 spectrum.
All right. So if this is your first time here for the Career Readiness Network, we will talk about sort of our structure and our topics. If this is your sixth time here, probably technically fifth time here, just a little preview of what's ahead. So we have structured the year to be hybrid for in-person and virtual sessions. We are in the thick of our virtual sessions today. We have one more virtual next month in March. And then in the spring, I'm going to speak positively to spring. We will then return to our in-person. So if you are outside of Kent County, we are so glad that you are able to join us for the virtual. If you are able to make it in person, you are more than welcome for those in-person sessions, but we understand geography is a little harder. So generally, we also include a portion of our sessions to have discussion by grade levels or by grade bands. So typically have an elementary breakout room and a high school or secondary breakout room. Based on that, you can see that you can't see, but now you can see the topics that we've covered in the past. We do have any of our virtual sessions recorded and uploaded to our Padlet, which we will talk about in a minute, and to our YouTube channel. Our in-person, we have not recorded. Those are not available for sketches, but the content is there if you're curious about one of our past sessions. And then you can look at the topics that are coming up. So next month, we'll be talking about creating your definition of college and career readiness. In April, when we're back in person, we'll host an apprenticeship panel. And then our goal is really to be responsive to the needs of the folks that we serve. So we've had a number of sessions that are open to participant input. So if you are here today and you have a great idea or a topic that you are like, I need some resources and I don't think I'm the only one, you can drop that in our Padlet, which we will share with you in a second. Message us, email us, send us your carrier pigeon, however, so that we can make it most useful for you. So thinking about the mindsets for today's session, Samantha and I really try to lead this through an inquiry-based mindset, through asking questions, exploring and unpacking assumptions. Recognizing that there is no simple answer, but that there's also no one particular expert on this topic, right? So we are bringing a perspective with options to the table, but we know that there's complexities and nuances, and that there's many great ways to approach this work, and that the learning process is not a straight line. So you may try something one year, and then you know how to make it better for the next year and move it in a slightly different direction. And as you are a participant in today's session, we ask that you bring that same mindset in terms of problem solving and action oriented, so that as we go through this, if something could be stronger, let's help make it stronger. But also, Samantha and I recognize, like, you have given up 2 hours of your precious day. That means that this work needs to have an immediate connection and application to your setting. And if at any point it is not, let us know, or help us solve that so that it feels even more relevant, to help your work go more smoothly. I do want to pause to see if there are any additions to the mindsets that folks would like to add or amplify. If you do, you can drop them in the chat. I'm seeing, okay, I'll address your question in 1 second, Renee. So just to get into a couple of logistical pieces, so there is a handout that has been dropped in the chat a couple of times already. I think Samantha is working on dropping it again. The handout we have made in a Google Doc. Renee, we are going to send it to you via email so that you have access to it. If anyone else does not have access to a Google account, let us know. So that's one sort of housekeeping thing around our handout. That handout will force you to make a copy. All of your information will then just be saved for yourself. We won't be able to access it. Nobody else will be able to see it either. So one piece of housekeeping is the handout. The second piece of housekeeping is our Padlet. So as our name of today's session, which is Career Readiness Network, indicates, our hope is that folks can stay connected between sessions or have additional conversations. So on our Padlet, which looks like this, you will see an option on the far left to be able to introduce yourself, give contact information. As I mentioned, we want to make these sessions relevant for you. So if you have ideas or topics for future sessions, you can drop them in this column. Questions are here, and then resources and additional links will be shared there. So if you are joining us just for today, know that this resource is here for you as well. All right, anything else on the Padlet? Okay, cool. Right, back into our PowerPoint. Okay. Is this me? No. All right, I'm turning it over to Samantha.
All right, so we generally try to have some type of kind of framing question as we go through our session. So today in this, you don't have to answer right now, just for you to reflect on for a moment, and we'll come back to it at the end. But in what ways does strengthening a student's understanding of themselves help them to be more satisfied with their college and career goals? Give you just a second. Oh, it's okay. You can give you just a second. You can think about that. But again, just keeping that in mind as we go through our session. So again, how does understanding themselves help them with their be more satisfied with their goals? All right. So jumping in, what are Holland codes? So how many people, you can use the like little emojis if you want. You know, how many people by emoji have heard of the term Holland code before in that way? You folks. Good. It goes by a lot of names. So hopefully we can clarify that for everyone today. But really, the history of it, Holland codes were developed by the psychologist John Holland in the 1950s. And John Holland's research all focused on vocation. And through his research, he basically, and it's been adapted into multiple different ways, but really through his research, he found that there are 6 primary domains of vocation. And so this is often referred to as RIASEC. And we're going to dive deeper into that in just a moment. But really the point of this is to help students explore careers that match their interests and strengths. And we know that people are more likely to be successful and happy in their careers that align with their dominant codes. And again, we'll jump further into that in just a moment. So where does this show up? So again, if you're using any of the kind of big name EDP platforms, in Zello, it's the matchmaker assessment. In Naviance, it's the career interest profiler. In the ONA, it's the interest profiler. So when students complete these assessments, they'll get their Holland code, and they will be able to see this as it relates to all of these different careers. All right, so again, a lot of times people refer to it as the RIASEC. That's, a common term you might hear. But really the idea behind this is that students will get a code of 2 to 3 letters. You can click one more time. No, just one. So they'll get a code of 2 to 3 letters. So what does RIASEC stand for? R is for realistic, who are the doers, and we'll again dive deeper into all these in just a moment. Investigative are the thinkers. Artistic are the creators. Social are the helpers. Enterprising are the persuaders. And conventional are the organizers. And so it always goes in this order, and there's a reason why. But again, goes by RIASEC. I'll talk about that in just a second, Amy, but no, you can go back. And so all validated tests, which the ones in your, EDP platforms, most of them available are validated tests. The data that they're pulling this from is comparing students' answers to responses from people who are happy and successful in their career. And so what does that mean? Really, when we're giving students a code, so most careers will have a 2 to 3 letter code as well. So students will get a 2 to 3 letter code, and all careers are matched to a 2 to 3 letter code. And the way that they've done that is by surveying people, a large sampling over a period of time, to see what are kind of the most typical codes that emerge from people who are happy and successful in their career. So by successful, they mean some level of longevity. So most data sets use, they've been in this career for at least 3 to 5 years or something like that. So really the goal is that you're not getting just a bunch of like disgruntled lawyers or something and comparing students to people who hate their jobs, but really people who enjoy that work and have been in that work for some period of time. And so then when students take these assessments, they're comparing the students' results, their code, to the codes of people who, again, are kind of the average of that specific career. Oftentimes what we'll see is that students will get codes that are next to each other. So for example, a student might be an SIA or a REC or something like that. It doesn't always happen, but that's just usually pretty typical, and that's why that's in this order. But sometimes what we'll see is that they'll have 2 codes that are together and 1 code that's across from them. And a lot of times what that will come up as is, it'll come up as a hobby. So for example, if I had a student who was social and artistic as their top 2 codes, and again, we'll dive deeper into these, but then realistic was, also in their code. That might mean that that student, really wants a job and would thrive in a field that's social and artistic. So maybe like teaching or social services or something like that. But maybe they really, really love going camping, or they love playing sports, or they love, fidgeting with things and building things. But maybe that's not the job that they really want. So maybe that comes up as a hobby for them. So just keep that in mind as we go through. A lot of times their code will be on kind of one side of this hexagon, but you might see students that have it, going across.
Again, thank you for our patience as we navigate the clunkiness of Zoom and the world of all of that. So as Samantha mentioned, we're going to dive more deeply into what each of those letters indicates. So the R for realistic are the doers. So they are folks that like to work with things. They may have, according to that, right, they may have that mechanical ability, but there is also often an athletic ability. There's a strong preference to work with objects, machines, tools, plants, animals. Correspondingly, there's often enjoyment in being outside, but it's that preference for working with things versus people or ideas. And then if you think about that sort of more deeply, if you are preferring to work with with a tool or with an object as compared to an idea, you're often preferring the concrete over the abstract. So some example careers that come with that: mechanic, plumber, military. Obviously there are a lot within the military, but thinking more about those military ones that have that mechanical ability tied within it. As we work our way around the hexagon, then we have the investigative or the thinkers. So this is the people who like to work with ideas and concepts, enjoy the observations, the investigation, the analysis, the evaluation, that problem solving. So if you go back to our would you rather at the beginning, those are the folks who might have answered that they would prefer to solve the puzzles. Enjoying that theory, that research, and again, working with ideas over people. Not surprisingly, probably then is the concept of it being a scientist, a private investigator, or a software developer to correspond with those. Right, for our creators, our artistic, when we think about artistic, I will name probably the biggest misconception from a student's perspective is I need to literally be an artist. I like to think about it more in terms of that innovation, that intuition that comes with it, having the flexibility and the creativity in their space, right? So if somebody is more inclined to work with mechanical objects and be on that realistic side, they're probably going to be very linear in their thinking about it, whereas an artistic person may want to kind of work through things in their own ways and not necessarily follow that process and procedure. So it's that use of creativity or imagination, seeing things from a different perspective, working with self-expressive ideas. So example careers, obviously you're going to have your artist, your designer, your actor, your writer, to be able to approach things in new ways. Right. I think I hand it back to Samantha now.
All right, so the next one is social. So they are the helpers. And again, another common misconception with this one is that social people enjoy talking or they talk a lot. And that is not the case at all. Again, it's just that they tend to like to help people. And I would imagine we probably have a lot of social or S's in this group here. But social, again, is one of our people-y ones, that they like to serve and help others. They enjoy working with people. They enjoy forming relationships. Some of their kind of key skills are informing, helping, training, curing others. They prefer solving problems through discussion. So again, working with other people. And so some example careers for this one: nurse, teacher, counselor, all of our helping professions. Our other people-y centered one is enterprising. So again, these are the persuaders. And so they like to work with people, but kind of in a different way. They tend to be the people that like to lead others. They enjoy influencing, persuading, leading, managing other people. Their main focus is on economic gain or for the goals of an organization or their self. So very goal-oriented. They tend to like leadership positions and dislike details. And some example careers for enterprising would be sales, marketing, and lawyers. And the last one here is conventional. These are our organizers. So they really love rules and processes. They tend to enjoy working with data. They have a strong aptitude for numerical and clerical work. They're very detail-oriented, follow through on other people's instructions. They tend to prefer structured situations. So some example careers for conventional would be accountant, court reporter, and pharmacist. But as I said before, most careers are going to have a 2 to 3 letter code. So even though you'll see these example careers here, an accountant actually has more things in it besides just conventional. But again, so they have that 2 to 3 letter code, and then students will also get that 2 to 3 letter code. All right, so why is this important? So again, we know that the more students understand about themselves, the higher satisfaction they will have in their future careers. My career before this role, I worked in college career services. And I would start a lot of appointments with students, especially if they were choosing a major or trying to figure out what job they wanted. And I would ask, oh, did you take any assessments in high school? And a lot of times they were like, oh yeah, I took it and it told me I should be a florist or a funeral director or a bartender. and they kind of dismissed it. So, sometimes students would get upset when they saw certain careers show up that they didn't quite understand, like why this thing was coming up. So understanding Holland codes can help them, and how to use them can help them see why something might have come up and what skills or interests they have in common with that job, but why that might not be the best fit career for them. So I threw an example up here. Again, one that I heard a lot from students that they'd be disgruntled by was funeral home director. So again, every job will be assigned a 2 to 3 letter code. So funeral home director is enterprising, conventional, and social. So ECS. And so maybe the student is really good at persuading, they're good at sales, they're a logical thinker, but they don't necessarily want to work with like corpses or grieving families. So where else does ECS show up? So another one that's an exact match is real estate agent, has the same code in the same order. So again, very similar skills. They're selling something, they're working with others, but obviously a real estate agent has a very different purpose and goal than a funeral home director. So maybe that's a better use of their skill set. Some other careers that have some combination of ECS in a different order would be a court clerk, a fundraiser, a legislator, and all of these have similarities and different skill sets, similar skill sets, but they work with different types of people and for different purposes or goals. So helping students understand RIASEC and understanding what all of these different domains mean, and helping them see the similarities and how their interests match those jobs can help them better understand the assessment, better understand themselves, and hopefully use it to help them make more informed decisions.
One additional thing is if you are using ONET and My Next Moves, there is a way to actually search the careers to the corresponding letter codes. So at the end of today's session, I will have that pulled up so that I can actually show you that. I don't want to waste your time while you watch me Google things, but I will actually have that prepared and ready in the last portion of our conversation so that you can actually see those combinations. And it's a drop-down menu so that then you can be able to flip and flop the order of the letters and be able to see those. So Beth, I see your question. We'll pull that up at the end. Because as you are working with students, that could be a really powerful exercise for them to be able to compare and contrast. If I move the E to the second spot, what kind of different careers come up? And then it gets into that reflection and that self-awareness to say, okay, what are the skills I might need to strengthen? Or as I think about going into this career, how can I support myself knowing that it's a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but it's still something that I'm passionate about, so I want to pursue it. Cool. Anything else on that? Cool. All right, so today's session is a combination of like the knowledge and the content around Holland's code, but then it is also this idea about teaching it interactively. And so we want to talk a little bit about some like best practices or principles of learning and engagement, so that this content sticks with students, so that this content stays alive with them. Because the reality is, if we think about career development in that K-12 spectrum, they're going to probably have conversations about Holland codes or about understanding themselves and the connection to career at various points in their education. And if we can make it stickier, if we can make it more engaging, then the hope and the idea is that as they go and grow through the educational system, that everything builds on each other. And that if you are a 7th grade teacher teaching it, and maybe they got it in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, that you can build upon that rather than have to restart it every time. So the stronger that our content is, hopefully then the better outcomes for students. So we are going to talk a little bit about some strategies to increase learning, to increase engagement. And some of that is grounded then in cognitive load theory. So I am going to share a video. Bear with me to make sure that the sound comes through as well. Right.
Imagine holding a 10-pound weight above your head. For many people, that's pretty easy. Now, hold that weight for 2 minutes. Still possible, but more challenging. All right, now hold that for 15 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. Over time, even a small amount of weight grows unbearable. Your muscles need rest and recovery. Similarly, when we're learning, our brains can only handle so much information before needing a break. Dr. John Sweller coined the term cognitive load to describe the amount of information working memory can hold in the moment. This is why you find yourself tuning out a lecture about an hour into it. It's also why you tend to forget most of the information when you cram for a test, why you struggle with certain confusing diagrams, and why you might have a hard time with long, complicated verbal directions. Cognitive load theory builds on Atkinson and Shiffrin's model of information processing theory. Here's how it works. We all experience incoming information through our sensory memory. Think of this as anything we see, touch, hear, smell, and taste in the moment. Sensory memory is instantaneous, and much of it is forgotten. But some of the information moves to working memory. Working memory is what we are thinking in the moment. Here, the information is either forgotten or moved into long-term memory through a process called encoding, where the brain categorizes the information. We can help ensure that information moves from working memory to long-term memory through a rehearsal process. If you've ever repeated a phone number over and over again to remember it, or you've paraphrased information, or you've put events into a sequence, then you've engaged in this rehearsal process. Later, your working memory can retrieve information from long-term memory back into the working memory. More recently, Dr. Barbara Oakley, co-author of Uncommon Sense Teaching, has introduced an approach based on cognitive science to reduce cognitive load through retrieval practice. So how can we as educators reduce cognitive load? Number one, break up the instruction to give students a chance to process the information at an individual and collaborative level. You might do something like a think, pair, share, where students summarize what they learned or answer a critical thinking question. Or students might jot down any question they have, or write down something that they're confused about. They might pause to fill out a graphic organizer like a table or a flowchart. When learning a new concept, students could add to a concept map, summarize a key idea in a 1-minute summary, complete a Venn diagram, or brainstorm examples of that concept. When learning a new skill, you can break tasks down into parts. Here, students view a step in the process and then practice it individually. Afterwards, they move to the next step and practice that step. Then it continues for the remaining steps. Number two, engage in brain breaks. In fitness, athletes often engage in interval training where they do intense focused exercise followed by a period of short rest and then focused exercise again. Similarly, students will retain more information if they have focused learning followed by short bursts of rest called brain breaks, where the brain can consolidate the information and make connections between ideas while students rest. Brain breaks might include a short walk, a fun game, a coordinated physical movement, or a quick divergent thinking challenge. Number three, we can design our instructional materials to reduce the split attention effect. The split attention effect occurs when students must divide their attention between two sources of information, like a diagram and a text. So when you do provide a diagram, place the text on the diagram itself instead of below or beside the diagram. When giving directions, combine written and audio instructions, and break the instructions into bullet points or numbered lists. You might also use templates with clear visuals to create a sense of predictability. When working on projects, you might use a general blueprint or a to-do list that students can use as they track their progress along the journey. Number 4, embrace active learning. Now, this doesn't mean that students have to be moving around the whole time. The key is to be mentally active. As Freeman in 2014 put it, active learning engages students in the process of learning through activities and discussions in class, as opposed to passively listening to an expert. This active learning often involves critical thinking questions, peer interaction, visualization techniques, and opportunities to apply the knowledge that they're learning to case studies, problems, and projects. As educators, we can reduce cognitive load by implementing these simple strategies. Over time, these small tweaks can make a huge difference in the lifelong learning of our students.
Okay. So to, bear with me. All right. So using the principles of that video, going through a numbered list, but just to kind of pull out some of the strategies and suggestions that are made in terms of reducing cognitive load, kind of quieting things down so that then students can focus and can get the most out of it, is breaking up instruction through think, pair, share, critical thinking questions, graphic organizers, concept maps, summaries, breaking tasks down, viewing and practicing each step, engaging in brain breaks, using physical activity to be able to do that, using play to be able to do that, or to be able to use other parts of their brain, other parts of thinking and approaching to give some rest in between. Designing materials that reduce the split attention effect. So ensuring that you have text onto your diagrams. So if we think about Holland's codes, right, we're not just putting R, but we're actually putting out realistic in that so that they can start to understand the diagrams, using bullet points, providing templates, chunking tasks into to-do lists. I imagine many of this is content that you are familiar with, but just want to elevate it as you think about designing lessons that are going to have the maximum impact. And then just embracing that active learning. So critical thinking questions, lots of peer interaction, visualization, and case studies to be able to help this come alive. I cannot remember if this is in your packet, but if not, please feel free to take a screenshot. I will pause for a moment in case that is helpful. We will, of course, send this out afterwards. All right, Samantha's got our packet pulled up. I can see you do not have this in your packet. You do have a link to the video, so you could reference that back at any other point in time. I'll wait another couple seconds in case you'd like to take a screenshot of this. But the idea is that as we move into the next section of today's agenda, where we're going to actually review activities, the activities that we are going to have you look at are a starting place. But as you think about, analyze, and perhaps modify those for your own use, using these principles and ideas as you go through that to how can you make this even stronger from there. So thinking about, are there critical thinking questions you could build into it? Are there brain breaks that are not exactly the content, but still on the topic that could be fun for students as they gain some content and then shift into the next part of the lesson? So that is our grounding around the engagement strategies, and we are going to shift into the next portion. So we have lots of slides to that point of reducing cognitive load. It is always hard to do things via Zoom and hard to sort of keep everybody together. So just a quick overview of what we're going to do. First, Samantha and I are going to review the 4 activities briefly with everybody. You will then have a few minutes to independently skim each activity to be able to identify one activity you're going to more deeply hone in on. So we'll quickly talk through it, then we'll give you some independent review time. That first independent review time is just to make a selection. Then we will give you a longer concentrated block of time to be able to like really dig into that activity, make sure you understand it, start to think about pros and cons for that activity. Then, again, thinking about that, reducing cognitive load and making things more engaging, then we will give you some peer interaction time to be able to discuss the selected activity, for you to be able to talk about what you think is strong about it, ways that you want to improve it as well. Then we will come all back together. We will walk you through each step of this along the way. If anybody gets lost at any point, you just let us know in the chat, and we will help you get caught up to where we are. So, we are going to now go through each of the 4 activities. Can you go back to the packet for 1 second? So in your packet on page 2, you have these 4 activities linked as well. If you are somebody that would prefer to just look at it on your own, those links are there. We are going to talk about it. We will have a slide that gives you a visual anchor for it. So if it is overwhelming to have the handout open and be clicking on links and everything, you don't need to just yet. Sound good? All right, I'm going to turn it over to Samantha.
All right, so our first activity is probably the most popular, the one most people have heard of, if they've heard of one, and that is the Holland Party. So this was developed by Richard Bowles, who's the author of What Color is My Parachute, which is a wonderful career development handbook tool. And really the basic premise of this is that you tell students they're going to a party. At this party, people with the same or similar interests are all in different corners of the room. And then you ask them, who would you be most drawn to? So if one corner has people who are athletic or mechanical or like to be outdoors, if another corner has people who are artistic and innovating and, like unstructured situations, and you ask them which corner of the room they would be most drawn to. And then you go through a series of, okay, if all of those people left, where else would you go? What would be your second most enticing corner of the room? And then your third most enticing corner of the room.
All right, and then activity number 2 is a little bit more hands-on. And so the idea is that you have students going through activities that are related to each of the letters. So you would have an activity that is more artistic or creative that students would be completing in the artistic section. They'd have a couple minutes to go through that experience, reflect on how they felt. Then they would shift to an activity about social. So maybe in this one, the activity actually gives examples within there, but they're doing something that is very social in nature. Everybody reflects on it, then they rotate to the next one. So this would have students actually doing a short, brief activity and then some self-reflection on what that felt like. They would make their way through each of the stations, and then you would conclude with actually having students take a interest profiler to be able to compare and contrast. So that way they get some hands-on practice with what each of those are like. They can see, does that resonate? Does that not resonate? Then take an assessment and compare and contrast on those. Again, in a moment, you're going to have much more time to be able to dig in. Your goal as we head through these 4 activities is just kind of which one is piquing your interest, which one are you curious about, maybe which one have you never done before, so that you could think about that one. The third activity is that idea of inquiry questions and really honing in on that discussion and sort of being able to set up a debate. So we're calling it In Defense of the Letter. So students would take a self-assessment and then they would capture the corresponding Holland's codes. And then you would separate students into 6 groups corresponding to their highest scoring letter. So all of the students with a high A would head together in one group. That group's task is to be able to explain what the A means and how to recognize it in yourself or in others. But then really the meat of it is using some resources, they are creating an argument for why that is the best Holland's code. We as educators know that there is not one that is best, but you're really tapping into that competitive nature, tapping into that convincing and that arguing, right? They need to know their letter really well to be able to pitch it to the rest of the class about why that one is best. Lots of flexibility in what that could look like for students to be able to choose. I imagine their choice would probably correspond to their letter as well, right? I could imagine that our conventional folks might be more likely to lean on a PowerPoint slide than a song. But some examples there, you will have more time to dig into that one as well. And then that leads us to our 4th one.
Our last activity is party planning. So your team has been given $50,000 to host a party. What are you going to do? And so you have students divide into groups based on their first or maybe second letter in their Holland code. And then you give them some time to figure out how they would spend this money. What would this party look like? And so really just trying to see what all of the different, based on people's different interests and strengths, how they might differ in terms of what this party looks like. How are they going to spend their budget? Is there going to be a theme? Is there going to be music? Is there going to be a structured activity? So giving them time to plan through what their party would look like for their group.
All right. Bringing us back to our flow of things. So we are going to give you 5 minutes. We'll see where we're at that. 5 minutes to review those 4 activities. Again, those are in your handout on page 2. You'll see the links to them. So based on our quick overview, which one are you leaning towards? But you can skim all 4 during these 5 minutes. And it is 8:52 and we'll come back together at 8:57. So you're using this time to select which one activity do you want to dive deeply in and have some breakout room discussions on. All right, it is 8:57. If you could give me a thumbs up, either in the chat or on the screen with the reactions, if you are good to go, you've selected which one activity. I see a smiley face, I see thumbs up. I see more thumbs up. Okay, cool. We are going to move forward. If you need the time, there will be, you will have more independent time. So use your time as adults. I trust you. So we are now going to move into the independent reflection and review of the selected activities. I am going to put some questions up on the screen to guide your reflection as you are going through this. So as you're reviewing the activity, obviously check in with yourself. Is this something you would feel comfortable leading? Is there more information that you would need before you're comfortable leading it through? Is this something that would work well with the students that you are serving? But some additional reflection questions. So what group of students would be best served through this activity? You think about that in terms of age level. If there are if you think about it through like a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 kind of approach to it, if you think about it through content areas, however you think about groups of students, but which ones would be best served through this? As you review it, what are the strengths of the activity? Is there anything missing from the activity? And going back to that mindset around problem solving, how might you address that? When we get into the group breakout, that might be helpful for you to say like, hey, I feel like this is missing. This is an idea I had. Did anybody else notice this? Does anybody else have ideas on that? how could the activity overall be strengthened? And again, that relates back to which group of students would be best served through the activity. So if you say, hey, as written, this is best served for maybe a middle school, I want to deliver it at a high school, then you could spend some time thinking about how could I strengthen that? And then what adaptations would you make to reach a different audience? So we are going to have 10 minutes for independent reflection time on this. So you're just noting for yourself, hey, I'm working on activity 1. I'm kind of reflecting on it, analyzing it, making suggestions. After the 10 minutes, I'll check in, see if we need more time, and we'll move into breakout rooms that will be based upon the different activities. So when the breakout rooms come up, you'll be able to choose which activity you chose. You'll be able to select the breakout room that corresponds to the activity you chose and be able to have discussion there. But for the next 10 minutes, this is independent review and reflection of this. So it is 9 o'clock. So that gives us 10 minutes till 9:10. I'll put that in the chat in case you need a reminder. I will leave these reflection questions up. Please also feel free, of course, to screenshot them, jot them down if you need to. So you'll have 10 minutes for an independent review of your activity, and then we will go into breakout rooms. If you get stuck or have any technical issues during this time, please feel free to chat us either privately or in the whole group, and we'll help you.
For all grade levels, what are we feeling here? All right, we said all grade levels for number 4. So yeah, that was the party planning one. Yep, the party activity. Perfect for 5th and 6th graders. Definitely can see how that one would be adaptable for all grade levels. For sure. All right, did you find that there were some that would be best suited for having students take before they've taken any assessments, or ones that you think would be better after they've taken some assessments? So before they've like learned about Holland Code, before they've learned, what their code is versus after. Any that you thought kind of
We
leaning
talked in the party planning one about, well, I talked about how I thought it would be a neat idea to have them do that before they had been introduced to the codes, and then reflect on the activity and just acknowledge who kind of rose to the top as the organizer and who had really creative ideas. And
Yes.
and even I can see them kind of pairing the type of party that they plan individually as where the type of workplace they might enjoy being a part of.
I love that. Yeah, and we'll get to adaptations in a little bit, but I love that you thought outside the box a little bit. Again, the baseline one was, having them separate based on their type, but absolutely could see, if you have one person who's super detail oriented and is worried about that $50,000 and where it's going versus someone who's like, I just want the most extravagant party. We're going to do this and this and this. You could see those different skills and personalities shine through that. So I love that. Any other thoughts on before versus after taking those assessments?
I have a thought. I don't know necessarily to think an assessment. I think more in understanding your students about their abilities, most particularly with reading and comprehension, so that they don't feel, so that they could participate and they are not intimidated.
Mm-hmm.
And not being able to understand, and maybe they have something to say but are not able to read it right. And so I think it's really important to understand the students that we are serving.
Yes, for sure. And that will also maybe come in when we talk about adaptations here in just a second. Again, these are baseline activities, but then how do we make sure that they meet the needs of our specific students, whether that's our student population, the grade level, other activities they've already done.
And I think one thing, maybe a tangent off of that, is thinking as you're going through your planning process, is the activity to introduce students to it, to get them excited about what is coming next in terms of taking one of the personality assessments or the interest profilers? Or is your intention to be on that higher order thinking in terms of an analysis, a reflection, right? So if it is like, hey, as you went through this, what did it bring up for you? What did you like about that? Did you like learning and thinking about this for yourself? That might be the before. But if you're more of like, as you went through this activity, did it resonate for you? Was it accurate as you did that small group exercise? That might be more of the after, and then figuring out the appropriate grade level or content area for that to live in too.
All right, now the fun part, we would love to hear some ideas. So what was a great idea or adaptation you heard or something you contributed? So loved the example we got before about the party and, maybe switching up how we organize that, but would love to hear other thoughts that different groups had. So again, feel free to unmute yourself or throw those in the chat. Not seeing any. So for example, like I know I've used the Holland party many times in the past, and as it's like laid out, kind of the baseline is just having students pick those different corners, and that can be used before they've taken any assessments to figure out what their code might be. It could be used as a way to kind of confirm their code if they've taken an assessment and they want to see like, does that match up? But a lot of times, the baseline doesn't really have any discussion beyond that. So what I've done is, having students get into that first group and then discuss like why they picked that and being able to pick out the similarities with their other group members. And then maybe also talking about some differences. So what are some other things they like and how might those relate to other areas of their personality or their different codes?
I was in a breakout room and we were discussing activity number 2, I believe, which is the oceans careers, and thinking about where this lesson lives, right? So if you think about the activity specifically in terms of careers relating to the ocean or STEM, are you partnering with a content area teacher to kind of infuse this into their lessons? Or are you actually kind of stripping away that it's about STEM careers and more focusing on the hands-on activities that students were doing to practice each of the 6 areas? That's one adaptation, is do you kind of hone it towards a specific content area? And I'm just curious, as you were thinking about your activities, were you thinking about this something where you would partner with a academic subject teacher and kind of incorporate it with theirs? Or were you thinking about this as a standalone sort of classroom guidance lesson that you would be teaching, either pushing into a class, or that you would be partnering with an advisor or doing during the advisory period? Because that's going to shift how you adapt it or the ideas that you incorporate.
Love this idea in the chat here. So, yeah, one thing we are a huge proponent of is incorporating it into things you're already doing, right? So, maybe you're doing a Valentine party. Is there something you could do with that party idea that surrounds that, incorporating it with something that's already happening, maybe in a classroom? All right, feel free, if you do have any other adaptations you want to share, you can go ahead and throw those in the chat. But our last question for this portion, in what ways will teaching Holland codes through these activities make these lessons more engaging? Any thoughts? And kind of a basis for for this session for us is thinking, we work with a lot of counselors who say, we're doing, interest assessments in, or interest inventories in Zello or Naviance or whatever. But then they might not have time to really discuss those. Again, students aren't necessarily understanding why those things are coming up. So we really wanted to connect that to the Holland codes, kind of the, the background work of why these things are coming up, to be able to showcase, again, why these things come up for them. Yeah, some great things, hands-on, immersing them. We love hands-on things, helps increase understanding. Yes, this is not a one-time thing, but a lifetime lesson in understanding what you like and what you're good at and how that helps you determine what to do. Lifetime learning and problem solving, not a pick one career. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Shelley, that's something we talk about a lot, is that, our goal is not to have students pick their forever career in 7th grade, right? We want them to be able to start exploring stuff, maybe pick something that they're interested in, but the real skill here is being able to evaluate themselves. So again, if we go back to the funeral home director example, no, maybe that's not what they want to do. They're not picking that for the rest of their life, but they can understand why that might have come up, what the skills were that were necessary for that job, how that fit their personality or their specific traits. And then they can use that to evaluate things in the future. And, just understanding that, again, we're not asking them to pick something forever, but that they'll be able to reevaluate throughout the rest of their life.
And one of the ideas that I've spent some time thinking about recently, and I'm going to try to get us back to this visual for a moment, if I think about those cognitive load principles. If we are thinking about the RIASEC diagram, but we approach this idea that there's not one career that somebody is working towards, but instead we're thinking about lifetime learning and problem solving, sort of shifting the question from what do you want to be when you grow up into what do you care about? What kind of problems do you want to solve in the world, right? So if we use an example that a lot of young folks are interested in, which is climate change, there are approaches and access to solving the problem related to climate change that correspond to each of these, each of the Holland's codes, right? So we are going to need the enterprising folks who are going to be leading large movements, who are going to be getting people interested in that topic and passionate and fired up to be able to do it. We are also going to need scientists who show us the data, who lead through those investigative research processes. We are going to need social human services folks to help people address some of the impacts and implications that come out of climate disasters or sorts of things. So as you think about Holland's codes, it's also, this could be, what's your entry point into the problem solving that you want to do? What's the career field that's going to be the best match for you as you enter into that problem solving for that lifelong learning? So, all right, so as we promised, I am going to share the ONET visual so you can understand where to see lists of careers by Holland's code. I'm just calling it audible. I'm reading the chat. Yes. Yes. So it's that idea also of multiple pathways. I think Samantha and we've been talking about this is a lot of how do you help students see all of the various pathways that they could get to get towards their ultimate goal, partially so that they feel like they have a life of choice and opportunity, partially so that if any doors close, they know that there's other routes there, but also normalizing that you are going to evolve and grow and develop as you think about how you spend your time, your treasure, your talents as well. Okay, so to share the screen so you can see ONET, give me 1 second. Right. Okay, so I will put this link in the chat in a moment. We'll make sure it's on the Padlet, all that jazz. But we are using ONET, and students can get to this when they get their results, but this is also just a website you can send directly students to. So if you have a 3-letter interest code, you could put that in. So I know I am realistic, conventional, and social. I hit go, and it will give me careers that correspond to that. Things to be aware of as you navigate through this website. Number 1, you do not need to have 3. You can do it with 2. That is possible. I believe you can do it even just with 1. Yep. Obviously, if you're doing it with just 1, you're going to get a lot more results than getting the specificity of having all 3. The other thing to be aware of as you go through this, you could download it as spreadsheets. So if you did not want students to be clicking on everything, you can like share it with them or print it out. It's going to give your interest codes. It is going to then give you job zones. If you're not super familiar with ONET, the job zones, slightly misleading as a name, but they correspond to the amount of post-secondary education or training that's required. So job zone 1 is often things that may require a high school diploma or GED, but not always. Job zone 2 is going to require a high school diploma and maybe some training after. Job zone 3 is going to require something after high school in terms of training. That could be apprenticeships, trade schools. Job zones 4 and 5 is pretty guaranteed to require at least a bachelor's degree. And then job zone 5 would require master's, PhD, or terminal degrees there. If you don't want to, if you need to kind of keep it simplified on careers, just have students look at all, and you could say, pick 1 from each job zone. So that's one thing to think about. If you are working with students who are like, yep, I know I'm going to college, then think about selecting the job zone. Then it's going to give you the careers. The little sunshine means that nationally there's strong outlook in terms of hiring. And then they can actually click into those. So they could sort them in alphabetical order, sort them by job zone, and then be able to actually look at that. If you're not super familiar with ONET, then when you click in here, it will give you summary details. Pro tip, this is giving you sort of a probably late high school level of reading and way of approaching the material. Read, or maybe what I'm not saying there is this is very dry, right? This is, if you click on easy read, it will take you to a slightly more kid-friendly version of it. This easy read will include a 1 to 2 minute video. It's just visually structured slightly different. We'll always give you salary information. But also if you go here, you can click in, it will translate it into Spanish. As far as we know, there's not another language, but ONET is all transferable into Spanish. There are, if you wanted to get way into the weeds, there's ways to print all of this out, but I think this is the most approachable. So again, we'll drop that in the chat in a moment. Another resource that came up in our conversation in the breakout room, if you are approaching Holland codes in conjunction with post-secondary planning or majors at a 2 or 4 year school. This is an example at the University of Nebraska that has identified what majors they offer according to each of the Holland's codes. Obviously, we're in Michigan. I don't imagine that we have a lot of students heading to University of Nebraska, but this could be a launching pad to think about majors that correspond to it, right? So they give a quick definition of it, and then they give some majors. It would be fairly easy to then look at some of these majors and see what institutions within the state of Michigan or that your students typically head to would be available. So these could be one more resource as well. I think also for the sake of discussion, if in your group there were other websites, resources, tools, or things that came up, we'd love to give some time for folks to share those out, whether you shared it or someone in your group. So you could drop those in the chat or come off of mute. Oh, yes. And Samantha is going to share what the Holland's codes look like in Zello so that you can also similarly be able to help students unpack that.
All right. Sorry about that. So if you are a school that uses Naviance, I did just check, does use the actual like Holland code official terms. They use realistic, investigative, artistic, etc. And in Naviance, you also can search by Holland code. So similar to ONA, you can actually use those codes just to specifically look. So in Zello, as another example, when students get their kind of career matches, you know, obviously those are based on their Holland codes, but it doesn't necessarily sort them by that. But what they can do, or if they're kind of confused about why something comes up, I'll just search for a career. So we'll look at like federal agent here. One thing that I don't love is that Zello does not use the same terms. They're very similar. It's in the same order. You'll get the same idea. But if you scroll down on any job, you'll see jobs that are, or that it's well suited to these personality types. And so they call them builder, thinker, creator, helper, persuader, organizer. So again, same idea, just different words. But then the student will actually see, okay, the ones with this little face are their styles. So in my demo account here, my top styles are organizer, persuader, and helper. This particular job is high for thinkers and persuaders. So it shows, you know, how I match it or how I don't match it. So again, a little bit of different language used here in Zello, but that is where you would find it for any job. You'll be able to scroll down and see the personality types that are well suited to that position. All right. I'm going to move us into our closing. So want to come back to this big picture question after having done this exercise, after having talked about some of that reducing of cognitive load. In what ways does strengthening a student's understanding of themselves help them to be more satisfied with their college and career goals? So would love for any folks to either come off mute or drop in the chat. This technology today. Kind of any insights, takeaways, reflections on this question that came up for you today.
I work at a high school setting, and I just think that this is so important because I feel like so much of the time we spend just trying to help kids get through high school, and then they graduate and then don't have an idea of what to do or where to go. And so I love that we're able to spend some time with them thinking about careers and thinking about how to think about their future and not just get through high school.
And those are so interrelated too, right? There's a lot of data that shows once you see that practical application, once you have a sense of where this is all headed, high school dropout rates reduce, right? So yes, it is about making it through the current institution, and it's about that long-term vision. I really appreciate what Kimberly added in the chat around that. It's about the long-term goal, right? If you're in school counseling or if you're in education, you're in it for the long view, right? So it's that healthy work and home life. It's not having that crisis at 35 of, wow, this never fit with me, right? Yes, Gina, that fulfillment, right? And it's I think also like when Samantha was talking about the connection to hobbies, right? And it's understanding, yes, this is towards career, but this is about the full life picture, right? That sense of fulfillment. Other ideas that came up for me as I was reflecting on this question is, yes, it's about knowing what letter you are in the Holland's codes, but perhaps more broadly, it's about understanding that there is a process and that there are tools. So if you're feeling stuck in a moment, if you're feeling unfulfilled, if you're feeling like something isn't the right fit, they may not remember what letter they were. They may not remember what their party was that they planned for this activity, but they may remember, hey, there were some tools, there were some resources that I could use, or hey, the reason that this doesn't feel good isn't because of me as a human, but that this is because there's a mismatch here. And so I can take some steps there about creating that sense of agency, that sense of autonomy, hopefully reducing the feelings of isolation or of frustration or of feeling stuck along the way. And also being able to sense patterns and trends, right? Or being able to have a sense of shared understanding. So that moment when students are like, hey, you do that too? Wow, we have this connection there. Or even in conflict resolution of like, I'm super artistic and you are super conventional. Maybe there's just some different perspectives that we have in the world and how we approach our career, how we approach our projects. You know, group projects are always a thing. So yes, Renee, to the self-esteem and that self-image, right? You're trying to get them in that positive, vicious cycle, not vicious, the opposite of vicious, that positive cycle where the flywheel is going because they've got the strong self-image, the strong self-esteem, they feel a sense of success, in finding those moments. All right, so we are coming up on the end of the session. I want to give Samantha a chance. Do you want to add in anything, or you ready for the next?
Yes, and yes.
Yes, and yes. All right, I'm gonna hit it to the next slide, but also turn it over to Samantha.
Yeah, and for me, again, reflecting, I again go back to the point Shelley made earlier. For me, it's all also about, again, the learned skill and the ability to pivot. Like I think of my own experience, you know, my assessments, everything always told me like to go into counseling, to be a teacher, things like that. I feel like that matches my skill set, my personality, all of the things. And it wasn't until I tried it in college, you know, I'd done all the things, I got there, I was going to do it. And then I was like, oh, actually, I hate this. I don't want to do this as a job. And, you know, there were just little things about it. And obviously, like I pivoted in a way that's, you know, still related, still using a lot of the same skill set. But you have to be able to understand yourself and understand that process to be able to do that. So, you know, even if, you know, once our students have left us, they're, you know, out 5, 6, 20 years, they're going to remember, you know, these skills to be able to reassess themselves and to be able to figure out kind of what's next. And what's next for us here. So again, that Padlet is always open. So whether this is your only session you've joined, or if you've joined them, you know, us for all of the sessions, please feel free to use that as a resource. Put questions in there. You can link resources you have. You can put requests for our last session in there. Always available to you. Our next session will be our last virtual session, March 13th. And again, that is about creating your definition of college and career readiness. So we hope you'll join us for that. Virtual March 13th from 8 to 10 a.m. And then our session after that will be April 24th. We will return to our in-person format. So that will take place here at Kent ISD in Grand Rapids. And that one will be in an apprenticeships panel. And again, thank you all so much for joining us. We have our emails up here on the slide. Even if you are outside of Kent ISD, we're always happy to help however we can.